My name is Dr. Michael Blackwood, and this happened to me back in 1977. I still get chills thinking about those 3 months in Chaco Canyon. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I should even be telling this story, but people need to know what's out there. I was 45 then, working as an anthropologist, mainly studying ancient Pueblo sites. Pretty normal job, right? That's what I thought too. I had this old 1975 Winnebago Indian RV. She wasn't much to look at, but she was home. I'd fixed her up nice and cozy, perfect for my research trips into the desert. I wasn't alone on this trip. There was Joseph Running Bear, my guide, a quiet man with eyes that seemed to see right through you. He knew these lands like the back of his hand, came from a long line of native people who'd lived here forever. Then there was Lisa Martinez, bright young grad student, eager as a puppy, always asking questions. Maybe too many questions, looking back now. We set up camp at Chaco Canyon in New Mexico one hot summer evening. The sun was setting, painting the mesa walls in deep reds and purples. It was beautiful, sure, but something felt off. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and know someone's been there, even though you can't see them? It was like that, but everywhere. Joseph noticed it too. I caught him doing these little things, touching his medicine pouch, whispering prayers when he thought no one was looking. Lisa was too excited about the research to notice anything wrong. She kept talking about all the ancient Pueblo artifacts we might find, the papers we could write. That first night, I wrote in my journal. Camp established at Chaco Canyon. Team morale high. Weather clear. Simple professional notes. Nothing about the whispers we all pretended not to hear, or the shadows that seemed to move when you weren't looking straight at them. If only I'd known then what I know now. If only I'd listened to those first warnings. But I was a scientist, you see. I didn't believe in ghost stories or ancient curses. I wish I'd been wrong. The first weird thing happened just 3 days after we arrived. I woke up early, before sunrise, to make my usual coffee. That's when I saw them, strange symbols scratched into the side of my RV. They weren't there the night before, I'm sure of it. They looked old, like ancient cave drawings, but the scratches were fresh. "Hey, Joseph, come look at this," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Joseph came over, his face going pale when he saw the marks. He touched them gently, then quickly pulled his hand back like they were hot. "These are bad signs, Dr. Blackwood," he said quietly. "Very bad signs. My people know them. They speak of the hungry ones." Lisa came bouncing over with her camera, excited as always. "This is amazing. Look at these patterns. They're just like the ones in the ancient texts." She started taking pictures, not noticing how Joseph kept backing away. Later that day, we found something that made my stomach turn. About a mile from camp, there were 3 dead cattle arranged in a perfect spiral. Now I'd seen animal attacks before, but this was different. Too neat, too planned. The ranchers around here would never waste cattle like this. That evening, something even stranger happened. Lisa was cleaning some broken pottery pieces we'd found, laying them out on a table. We all went to get dinner, and when we came back, the pieces had moved. Not just a little, they'd somehow put themselves together, forming half a pod. "Must have been the wind," Lisa said, but there hadn't been any wind, and the pieces fit too perfectly. Joseph was getting more nervous. He kept looking at the moon, which was growing fuller each night. "The Skinwalker's moon is coming," he told me while Lisa was asleep. "My grandfather used to talk about it. He said when that moon rises full, the hungry ones walk again." I tried to laugh it off, but my laugh sounded hollow. "Come on, Joseph, we're scientists. There must be a logical explanation." He just shook his head. "Science doesn't explain everything, Dr. Blackwood. You'll see." The next day, we tried to interview some locals about the area's history, but no one would talk to us. The moment the sun started setting, they all hurried inside. Doors locked, curtains drawn. One old woman just said, "Not after dark, never after dark." I wrote everything in my journal that night, my hands shaking a bit. The rational part of my mind kept saying there were normal explanations for all of this. But deep down, in that ancient part of our brains that knows when something is wrong, I was starting to feel real fear. I didn't sleep much that night. None of us did. The desert gets quiet at night usually, but not this night. This night, it felt like the whole canyon was holding its breath, waiting for something. And that something was coming. Things got really strange the next day when Lisa found this old leather journal stuffed in a crack in the canyon wall. It was from 1899, written by some researcher named William Cooper. His handwriting was messy, like he'd written everything in a hurry. "Look at this," Lisa said, her voice shaking a bit. "Cooper wrote about the same things we're seeing. The symbols, the dead animals, everything." She read out loud from a page. "Day 15. They watch us at night. Figures with deer skulls. My team is scared. The natives won't help anymore. The moon grows fuller." I felt cold despite the desert heat. Cooper's team had disappeared without a trace, all of them. The journal just stopped mid-sentence on the last page. That evening, I was checking our cameras when I noticed something in the photos from the day before. At first, I thought it was just shadows or rocks, but when I looked closer, there were figures standing on the mesa, tall, thin figures wearing what looked like deer skulls. In each photo, they were closer to our camp. "Joseph," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can you explain this?" He looked at the photos and dropped them like they were on fire. "Skinwalkers," he whispered. "They're testing us, watching us. My grandfather, he was studying them too, 30 years ago. They found his camera, but they never found him." That night was the worst yet. We were all in the RV when it started. First came the symbols, glowing ones, appearing in the air around us. They moved like they were alive, spinning slowly around the RV. The light they gave off was sickly green, making everything look wrong. Lisa was taking notes, her hands trembling. "This is impossible," she kept saying. "This can't be real." Then we heard it, voices calling our names. They sounded exactly like us. I heard my own voice calling from outside, asking for help. Joseph grabbed my arm when I almost went to look. "Don't," he said. "That's how they trick you. They learn your voice, your face. They make you trust them." We stayed up all night, huddled in the RV. The voices kept calling. Sometimes they sounded like people we knew. My mom, Lisa's brother, Joseph's wife. But something was off about them, like hearing a song played slightly out of tune. By morning, the symbols were gone. But we found footprints all around the RV. Human footprints that turned into animal tracks halfway through each step. I wrote in my journal, "Day 10. Can't trust what we see anymore. Can't trust what we hear. The moon is almost full. Joseph says we should leave, but Lisa insists on staying. Something is coming. I can feel it." Looking back now, we should have listened to Joseph. We should have left right then. But scientists always want proof, always want to understand. Sometimes, understanding comes at a terrible price. And we were about to pay it. The next morning, Lisa was gone. Just gone. Her sleeping bag was still warm, and there was a trail of footprints leading from the RV. But these weren't normal footprints. They started as Lisa's sneaker prints, then slowly changed into something else. The last few looked like deer hooves, with drops of blood beside them. "We have to find her." I grabbed my flashlight and backpack. Joseph held me back. "Wait," he said, his voice heavy with fear. "Look at the prints carefully." He was right. The footprints weren't running away from something. They were walking calmly, like Lisa had just decided to take a stroll. That scared me more than if they'd shown signs of a struggle. We followed the tracks to an ancient Pueblo building. The blood drops were getting bigger. Inside, we found Lisa's notebook. The last entry was in her handwriting, but it didn't make sense. Just the same words over and over. They sing. The walls sing, the mesa is hungry. Joseph's face went white when he saw some markings on the wall. "These are yesterday," he whispered. "These are fresh." The symbols were glowing faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. As we watched, they seemed to move, pointing toward a dark corner of the room. There was a hole there, leading down into the earth. Cool air rushed up from it, carrying a smell like old bones and something else. Something wrong. My grandfather wrote about this, Joseph said, his hands shaking as he touched his medicine pouch. He found a chamber under the mesa. That's where they take them. That's where they change them. Just then, we heard Lisa's voice echoing up from the hole. Michael? Joseph? Please help me. I'm hurt. I'm scared. It sounded like Lisa, but not quite. Like someone trying to copy her voice, but getting it slightly wrong. That's not her, Joseph warned. Not anymore. But we had to check. We couldn't just leave her. I clicked on my flashlight, and we started down the narrow tunnel. The walls were covered in those glowing symbols, leading us deeper and deeper. The tunnel opened into a large underground chamber. Our flashlight beams showed ancient pottery, bones, and fresh blood. Lots of blood. And there, in the corner, was a figure crouching over something. Lisa? I called out softly. The figure turned around slowly. It looked like Lisa, mostly. But her eyes were different. They glowed amber in the darkness, like animal eyes. And when she smiled, her teeth were wrong. You came, she said. But her voice had changed, too. It echoed strangely, like multiple voices speaking at once. The mesa has been waiting for you. That's when Joseph started chanting in his native language, and everything went crazy. As Joseph chanted, Lisa, or whatever she had become, let out a horrible scream. It wasn't human anymore. It was like a mix of a woman's cry and a deer's call. The sound bounced off the chamber walls, making my head hurt. The glowing symbols on the walls began to pulse faster, brighter. Then I saw them dark shapes moving in the shadows, figures wearing deer skulls, just like in our photos. They were everywhere, surrounding us. The portal. Joseph gasped between his chants. They're trying to open it. Dr. Blackwood, we can't let them. That's when I noticed something weird happening to Joseph. His eyes started glowing too, but with a different light, white and pure, not the sickly amber of Lisa's eyes. His voice changed, becoming deeper, older somehow. My grandfather's spirit, he managed to say. He's helping. He knows how to stop this. Lisa was changing more now. Her fingers were getting longer, darker. Antlers, real antlers, were pushing through her hair. She reached for me with those strange hands. Join us, she said. But it wasn't just her voice anymore. It was hundreds of voices, all speaking together. The mesa hungers. It must feed. Joseph grabbed my arm. The journal, he said urgently. Get Cooper's journal. The last page, there's a seal, a symbol. Draw it, quickly. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the journal. The last page had a strange mark, half finished. As I started drawing it on the ground with a piece of chalk from my pocket, Joseph stepped between me and the creatures. I understand now, he said calmly. This is why my grandfather stayed, why he died here. The portal must be sealed with a sacrifice. Before I could stop him, Joseph walked straight into the middle of the chamber. He started a new chant, different from before. The skinwalkers moved toward him, but they seemed afraid now. Run, Dr. Blackwood, he shouted. Finish the symbol and run. I wanted to help him, but I knew he was right. I finished drawing the symbol just as Joseph raised his arms. There was a flash of bright light, so bright it hurt my eyes. I heard Lisa screaming, the skinwalkers shrieking, and Joseph's last words in his native tongue. Then everything went quiet. When I could see again, I was alone in the chamber. No Lisa, no skinwalkers, no Joseph, just me, some bloodstains, and Cooper's journal in my hands. I ran all the way back to the RV and drove away as fast as I could. But here's the thing. Something came with me. Something in the journal, maybe, or in my memories. It's been weeks since I got back home, but things aren't right. At first, I tried to convince myself it was all just a bad dream. But then, I started noticing changes. It began when I was reviewing the footage from our cameras. I was alone in my study, going through each video carefully. That's when I saw my reflection in the computer screen. My eyes were glowing amber, just like Lisa's had. I blinked hard, and they went back to normal. But I know what I saw. The journal won't leave me alone. I've tried throwing it away 3 times now. Each time it shows up back on my desk the next morning. The pages are different, too. New writings appear in Cooper's handwriting, telling me to come back to the Mesa. Sometimes, I find myself writing in it without remembering when I started. At night, I hear the voices again. They sound like Joseph and Lisa, calling me from outside my window. "Come back," they say. "The Mesa misses you. The Mesa needs you." I've started seeing deer everywhere. They stand in my yard, watching my house. Their eyes glow in the dark. Yesterday, one of them had Lisa's face. I closed my curtains, but I could still feel them watching. The worst part? I'm starting to want to go back. Something pulls at me, especially during the full moon. I catch myself looking up train schedules to New Mexico. My hands shake when I draw, and they only make those strange symbols from the cave walls. Last night, I found deer hoof prints in my kitchen. They led to my bedroom mirror where I saw, well, let's just say I don't look quite the same anymore. Not all the time. I'm writing this down as a warning. If you're ever in Chaco Canyon and you see strange symbols or hear familiar voices calling, run. Run as fast as you can. Don't look back. Don't take pictures. Don't write anything down. Because the Mesa's hunger never ends. And I think it's not done with me yet. The journal ends here. Police reports show Dr. Michael Blackwood disappeared 3 days after writing this final entry. His house was found empty, except for strange symbols carved into every wall. The only other thing they found was a single deer hoof print in the dust on his desk. My name is Mark Davidson, and this happened to me back in 1995. I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but I need to warn others about what's hiding in those ancient cliffs of Bandelier. I was just a regular paranormal investigator then, working with my wife Helen. We'd been doing this for about 5 years, chasing ghosts and solving mysteries across the country in our old Winnebago. Helen was the brains of our operation, smart, curious, and had this special way of connecting with spirits. Me? I handled all the technical stuff, the cameras, and our special ghost hunting equipment. Our Winnebago wasn't just any ordinary RV. We'd bought it from this old ghost hunter named Pete, who was retiring. It was a 1990 model that we'd fixed up with all sorts of special gear. We had cameras that could see in the dark, machines that could detect ghosts, and even a tiny dark room where we could develop photos right away. Helen always joked that it was like a haunted house on wheels. We were doing pretty well with our investigations, mostly helping families deal with haunted houses or checking out spooky old buildings. But everything changed when we got a call about Bandelier National Monument in New Mexico. People had been disappearing there, not just recently but for decades. The park rangers were worried, and the local police had no answers. I remember the day we arrived. The sun was setting behind those massive cliff dwellings, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. The ancient homes carved into the rock face looked like hollow eyes staring down at us. Helen squeezed my hand and whispered, "This one's different, Mark. I can feel it." We had no idea then just how right she was. No idea that this wouldn't be just another investigation. No idea that it would change our lives forever, and that only one of us would make it back. Let me tell you exactly what happened in those canyons. But I warn you, after hearing this story, you'll never look at ancient ruins the same way again. We set up our camp near the base of the cliffs that first evening. The only sounds were the wind whistling through the ancient dwellings and the occasional cry of a distant coyote. Helen and I worked quickly to set up our equipment before dark. Cameras near the cave entrances, special microphones to catch any strange sounds, and our night vision drones for watching from above. That first night, everything seemed normal, almost too normal. You know that feeling when something's wrong? but you can't quite put your finger on it. That's how it felt. We sat in the Winnebago, watching our camera screens and listening through headphones. Around midnight, Helen noticed something odd on one of our recorders. "Mark, listen to this," she said, her voice shaking a little. When she played it back, my skin crawled. Among the usual wind and cricket sounds, there were voices, not English, not Spanish, not anything I'd ever heard before. They were singing or chanting something, but the weird part was that when we checked the live cameras, there was nobody there. The next morning, Helen woke up different. She was staring at her wrist, and I'll never forget the look on her face. There was this strange symbol on her skin, like a tiny spiral with marks around it. "I didn't draw this," she whispered. We tried washing it off, but it wouldn't budge. By sunset, the mark had grown bigger, spreading up her arm like a growing vine. That same day, I found something that made my blood run cold. Hidden behind a loose rock in one of the cave houses, there was an old leather journal. The pages were yellow and brittle, dated 1952. It belonged to a researcher named John Hartley, who had disappeared here. The last entry gave me chills. They're not just drawings on the walls. They move when nobody's watching. The coyotes aren't really coyotes. If you're reading this, get out before sunset. They've chosen someone from our group. I don't think we're going to. The entry stopped there, with a dark stain on the page that looked horribly like dried blood. I wanted to leave right then, pack up and drive away as fast as we could. But Helen refused. The symbols on her arm were spreading, and she said she could feel something pulling her toward the caves. She said we were meant to be here, that we had to understand what was happening. I should have insisted. I should have picked her up and carried her to the Winnebago, but I didn't know then what I know now. I didn't know that with each passing hour, we were being pulled deeper into something ancient and dangerous, something that had been waiting for someone like Helen for a very, very long time. Things got really strange on our third night. We were checking out a new cave we'd found, one that wasn't on any park maps. The sun was going down, and I was filming the cave paintings on the walls. You know, the usual stuff. People hunting animals, dancing around fires. Helen was taking pictures. That's when it happened. As the last bit of sunlight disappeared, I swear on my life, the paintings began to move. Not like they were coming off the wall or anything, but like watching an old television show. The painted hunters were actually chasing the deer. The dancers were really dancing. I nearly dropped my camera. Helen grabbed my arm so tight it hurt. "Mark," she whispered, "they're showing us something." We watched, frozen in place, as the painted figures acted out some kind of ceremony. They were all gathering around a central figure, someone who had the same spiral marks on their arms that Helen had. Then our flashlights started flickering. All our equipment went crazy, static on the radios, cameras turning on and off by themselves. That's when we heard the howling. It wasn't like normal coyote howls. These sounded almost like words. We rushed back to our Winnebago, but not before I saw something that I still have nightmares about. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw a coyote standing on its back legs, like a person. As I watched, its shape seemed to blur and shift. Just for a second, it looked like a human wearing animal skins. Then it vanished into the darkness. That night got worse. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to find Helen's side of the bed empty. I found her outside, walking barefoot toward the caves. Her eyes were open but empty, like she was sleepwalking. When I tried to wake her up, she spoke in that same strange language we'd heard on our recordings. I managed to get her back to the RV, but she had no memory of it in the morning. Instead, she told me about dreams she'd had, dreams of an ancient ceremony, of a doorway between worlds, of something powerful sleeping under the cliffs. I called for backup that morning. My old friend Sarah, she's a psychic, and Raj, he knows everything about ghost hunting technology, said they'd come help. I didn't tell Helen, but I was planning to get her out of there as soon as they arrived. The marks on her arms had spread to her shoulders now, and sometimes when she spoke, it didn't sound like her voice anymore. I wish I'd known then that calling for help would only make things worse. much worse. Sarah and Raj arrived the next afternoon. Sarah took one look at Helen and turned white as a sheet. "There's something inside her," she whispered to me when Helen wasn't listening. "Something old. Something that's been waiting." Raj got to work right away, setting up his special cameras and sensors around our campsite. "These will tell us if anything weird comes close," he explained. But by sunset, all his fancy equipment was going haywire, beeping and flashing for no reason. That night changed everything. We were all sitting in the Winnebago, watching the monitors, when Helen suddenly stood up. Her eyes had this strange glow to them, and she started speaking in that ancient language again. But this time, she didn't stop. Sarah grabbed my arm, her hand shaking. "She's channeling someone," Sarah said. "A priestess from long ago. Her name is Kayatan Mai." Then Helen, or whatever was speaking through her, told us about a doorway. A portal between our world and the spirit world, hidden deep in the caves. She said the symbols on her skin were a map leading to this doorway, and something was trying to use this doorway to come into our world. Raj volunteered to check out the cave entrance Helen had pointed to. We watched him on the cameras as he approached it. Everything seemed fine until he stepped inside. Then the camera went dead, just static. When it came back on a few seconds later, Raj was gone. We ran out to look for him. The cave entrance Helen had pointed to, it wasn't there anymore. Just solid rock. No sign of Raj anywhere. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. That's when we heard the drums. Deep, booming sounds coming from somewhere in the cliffs. Helen started walking toward the sound like she was in a trance. Sarah and I followed her, our flashlights bouncing off the canyon walls. What we found made my heart stop. In a hidden canyon, there was a group of people in dark robes, standing in a circle. Some of them looked like normal people. I even recognized a few faces from town. But others didn't look human at all. They were performing some kind of ceremony, and in the middle of their circle was a black hole in the air, like a tear in the world itself. And something was trying to come through. Sarah grabbed my arm and pointed to the edge of the circle. There was Raj's camera lying on the ground, but no sign of Raj himself. We backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound. But Helen was walking toward them, her arms glowing with those strange symbols, like they were calling her home. I tried to grab Helen, to pull her back, but it was like trying to stop a train. She just kept walking toward that black hole in the air. Sarah screamed, "Mark, look at the ground!" The earth around us was changing. One minute we were standing on dirt, the next on ancient stone floors, then back to dirt again. It was like time itself was breaking apart. The people in robes spotted us, but when they turned around, some of their faces weren't faces at all, just shadows where faces should be. They started chanting louder, and that's when things got really crazy. The black hole grew bigger. Through it I could see something huge and dark, with eyes that seemed to go on forever. Sarah fell to her knees, holding her head like she was in pain. "They're trying to bring it through," she gasped. "An ancient spirit, a dark god. If it comes through, everything ends." Helen turned to look at me then, but it wasn't really Helen anymore. Her eyes were glowing bright blue, and when she spoke, it was with two voices, hers and someone else's. "I know what I have to do," she said. "I'm the only one who can stop this." Before I could stop her, Helen ran straight toward the black hole. The symbols on her skin were glowing so bright they lit up the whole canyon. She raised her hands and started speaking in that ancient language, but this time it sounded like thunder. The robed figures tried to grab her, but they couldn't touch her. The symbols on her skin burned them when they got close. Helen reached the edge of the black hole and looked back at me one last time. "I love you, Mark," she said in her normal voice. Then she jumped straight into that darkness. There was a flash of light so bright it knocked me and Sarah to the ground. When we could see again, the black hole was closing, sucking in everything around it like a vacuum. The robed figures were screaming, running away as their shadows peeled off and got pulled into the hole. The ground stopped shifting between past and present. But Helen was gone, and so was our Winnebago. It had been parked too close to the ceremony and got pulled in just before the portal closed completely. Sarah and I were the only ones left in that canyon. But something was different about me. I could feel it. Part of me had been pulled into that other world too. I could see things now, spirits, glimpses of the past, tears in time. And sometimes, just sometimes, I can see Helen on the other side, watching over this place, making sure that doorway never opens again. That was 7 years ago. I'm different now. I live between worlds, you could say. Sometimes I'm solid like you. Sometimes I'm more like a ghost. Our old Winnebago, it changed too. It appears and disappears around Bandelier, but only people who really need to see it can find it. It's become my home and my way to travel between the real world and whatever's on the other side. Raj, we never found him, but sometimes on quiet nights, I hear his voice coming through my old radio equipment, warning others about places they shouldn't go. Sarah still visits me once a month. She's the only one who understands what I've become. As for Helen, I see her sometimes, not like she used to be, but as something else now. When the sun sets just right, I can see her standing on top of the cliffs, watching over everything. The symbols that were on her skin now glow in the rock walls at night, keeping the darkness away. I stay here at Bandelier now. I have to. You see, that thing they tried to bring through, it's still out there, still trying to find another way in. And there are still people in dark robes who come to these cliffs, trying to open new doorways. That's why I'm telling you this story. If you're ever hiking in Bandelier and you see strange symbols starting to appear on your skin, or if you hear drums coming from caves that shouldn't be there, get out. Get out fast. Or if you're really in trouble, look for an old Winnebago that seems to appear out of nowhere. I might be able to help. And if you're ever here at sunset and see a woman standing on the highest cliff, her arms covered in glowing symbols, don't be afraid. That's just Helen, doing what she's always done, protecting us all from things we don't understand. Some nights when the moon is full and the canyon is quiet, I park the Winnebago in our old camping spot. I set up my equipment, just like before, and I talk to Helen through the static. She can't say much back, but I know she's listening. And I know she doesn't regret what she did. Because sometimes saving the world means becoming part of its mysteries. And that's what we are now. Helen, me, and our haunted Winnebago. Just another story in these ancient canyons, keeping watch, protecting the doorway between worlds. So if you're ever in these parts and see something strange, well, now you know why. Just remember, some doors are better left closed, and some mysteries are better left unsolved. My name is Thomas Harrison, and this happened to me back in 1963. I still get chills thinking about those 3 weeks in White Sands, New Mexico. Sometimes I wake up at night, wondering if I could have done things differently, if I could have saved both my daughters. But let me start from the beginning. I was a Korean War vet, trying to piece my life back together. The war had left its marks, not all of them visible. My wife Eleanor, bless her soul, suggested we take a family trip across the country. Said it would help me heal, help us become closer as a family. We had saved up enough to buy a shiny new Airstream trailer. Eleanor called it our Silver Bullet. The kids, Billy and Patricia, were over the moon about it. Billy was my curious one, always had his nose in science books. At 12, he knew more about stars and rocks than I ever would. Patricia, my little Patty, was different. 8 years old, quiet as a mouse. But there was always something special about her. She understood things before they happened, felt things deeper than most folks. Even our German shepherd, Rex, was more protective of her than anyone else. Eleanor worked as a part-time photographer for our local paper back in Ohio. She had this old Kodak camera that never left her side. Every moment's worth capturing, she used to say. If only she knew how important those photos would become later. We planned the trip for months. Eleanor marked all the tourist spots on our map with little red stars. Billy made lists of geological sites he wanted to see. Even Patty got excited, though she kept having these strange dreams about the desert. I should have paid more attention to those dreams. We left Ohio on a sunny June morning. Everything we owned was packed into that airstream, our whole lives rolling down the highway towards what we thought would be our greatest adventure. None of us could have guessed what was waiting for us in those white sands. I'm telling this story now because I think people need to know. The military's cover-up story won't hold forever. And somewhere out there, in those shifting sands, my Patricia is still alive. Different now, but alive. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I swear I can hear her calling. This is our story. The story of how my family discovered something ancient and terrifying beneath the New Mexico desert. Something that had been waiting there for thousands of years. Something that changed us forever. The first weird things started happening as soon as we parked our Airstream at White Sands. The campground manager, an old fellow named Jim, kept looking at the sky while we checked in. "Strange weather we've been having," he said, though the sky looked perfectly normal to me. That first night, I noticed how quiet it was. Not the peaceful kind of quiet you'd expect in a desert. This was different. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Even the crickets weren't chirping. Rex, who usually slept soundly, kept pacing and whining at the trailer door. Around midnight, we felt it for the first time. A deep thumping sound, like a giant heartbeat coming from under the ground. Eleanor thought it might be military testing. We knew there was a base nearby. But something in my gut told me this was different. It reminded me of something I'd heard in Korea, something I'd tried hard to forget. The kids seemed to notice things before we did. The next morning, Billy came running back from his walk with Rex, all excited about some strange tracks he'd found. "Bigger than elephant footprints, Dad," he said. I went to look, but the wind had already covered them up. Patricia just stood there, staring at the spot, her small hand gripping my sleeve tightly. We decided to grab breakfast at the local diner in town. That's where we met Martha, the owner. Sweet lady, made the best pancakes I'd ever tasted. But when Patricia mentioned the thumping sounds, Martha's smile disappeared. She called them sand devils and told us we should leave before the new moon. I laughed it off then. Wish I hadn't. Rex started changing too. Our loving family dog began growling at shadows and digging holes in the sand, deeper than I'd ever seen him dig before. One evening, I found him standing still as a statue, staring at the ground, his fur standing straight up. When I called him, he looked at me with eyes that seemed different, almost like he knew something we didn't. Eleanor tried to keep things normal. She took photos of the kids playing in the sand, of the beautiful sunsets, of our camping setup. But I caught her deleting some pictures from her camera one night. When I asked why, she just shook her head and said they didn't come out right. Later, I found one she'd missed. It showed something long and dark moving under the sand, like a giant snake. But that was impossible, right? The military presence was growing too. More trucks passing by our campsite each day, always at night. Men in uniforms asking campers if they'd seen anything unusual. They said it was just routine exercises, but I'd been in the military. Nothing about this felt routine. I should have listened to my instincts, should have packed up and left right then. But something kept us there. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was fate, or maybe something wanted us to stay. Whatever it was, we were about to discover that some things are better left buried in the sand. Things got worse on our fifth night. I was sitting outside the trailer, trying to enjoy my evening coffee, when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just the sand moving in the wind. But winds don't move like that. Something massive was sliding beneath the surface, making the sand rise and fall like waves on the ocean. I dropped my coffee mug, and it shattered on the ground. Eleanor came running out when she heard the noise. That's when our trailer shifted, just slightly, but enough to make the dishes rattle inside. Patricia started crying, but it wasn't her usual cry. She was saying something over and over. "They're hungry. They're so hungry." Billy, brave kid that he was, had been doing his own detective work. He'd made friends with an old Native American man who ran the local gift shop. That evening he came back with a story that made my skin crawl. The man had told him about the great burrowers, ancient creatures that lived deep under the desert. His people had known about them for thousands of years, leaving warnings in cave paintings and stories. The military knew something too. That same night, we counted 12 trucks passing by our campsite. They were carrying what looked like giant drilling equipment. A young soldier stopped by, telling us they were conducting routine geological surveys. But I saw the fear in his eyes. He was just a kid himself, probably not much older than I was in Korea. Eleanor started seeing things in her photographs that shouldn't be there. Dark shapes with multiple eyes, reflecting light like a cat's eyes in the dark. She tried to show them to the military, but they confiscated her camera, said it was for national security. The worst part was what happened to Rex. Our loyal family dog started digging frantically every chance he got. One morning, I found him staring into one of his holes, growling deep in his throat. When I pulled him away, I saw something moving down there. Something that looked like a giant worm, but covered in what seemed like eyes. I blinked, and it was gone. Our trailer started sinking at night. Just a little at first. We'd wake up and find one side slightly lower than the other. I'd level it out each morning, telling myself it was just the sand shifting. But deep down, I knew better. Something was trying to pull us down. Patricia stopped sleeping. She'd sit by the window all night, whispering. Sometimes I'd catch bits of what she was saying, but it didn't sound like English or any language I'd ever heard. Billy tried to record her one night on his little tape recorder, but the tape came out blank, just static and a low, pulsing hum. Eleanor wanted to leave, but every time we tried, something would go wrong. The trailer would get stuck, or the engine wouldn't start, or we'd get turned around and end up back at our campsite. It was like the desert itself was keeping us there. I remember sitting there one night, watching the stars disappear one by one behind strange clouds, thinking about something my grandmother used to say. Some places choose you. White Sands had chosen us, all right. But for what? We were about to find out in the worst possible way. The night everything fell apart started with Patricia's scream. Not a normal child's scream. This was different, like she was calling out to something. When I rushed to her bed, her eyes were open but completely white, and she was speaking in that strange language again. Then we felt it. The biggest rumble yet. The whole trailer shook like it was made of paper. Billy's rock collection crashed to the floor, and Eleanor grabbed both kids, holding them tight. Rex started barking like crazy, not at the door this time, but at the floor. Through the window, I saw something that made my blood freeze. A massive shape was rising from the sand, like a giant worm breaking through the surface. But this was no ordinary worm. It was as big as a train car, with skin that looked like metal in the moonlight, and the eyes, dozens of them, glowing blue like the ones in Eleanor's photos. Patricia broke free from her mother's arms and ran to the window. "They're calling me," she whispered. "They want to show me something." Before any of us could move, she unlocked the door and ran outside. I chased after her, but the sand was moving like quicksand under my feet. The military trucks appeared out of nowhere, their spotlights cutting through the darkness. I heard someone shouting orders through a megaphone telling us to get back, but I couldn't leave my little girl out there. That's when I saw them clearly. 3 massive creatures, their bodies covered in what looked like ancient symbols. They moved through the sand like it was water. Patricia stood there, completely calm, as one of them lowered its huge head toward her. "No!" Eleanor screamed, running past me. The sand shifted again, opening up like a giant mouth. I reached for Eleanor's hand, but she was already sliding down into the darkness. Billy was screaming from the trailer doorway, and Rex was pulling at my sleeve, trying to drag me back. The military started firing, Not normal bullets, but some kind of electric charges. The creatures roared, a sound that shook the whole desert. One of them wrapped itself around Patricia, not to hurt her, but almost protectively. I saw something in that moment that reminded me of stories I'd heard in Korea, about ancient beings that lived deep in the earth, waiting for the right time to return. The old women in the villages used to say they could speak through children's dreams. Patricia looked back at me one last time. "It's okay, Daddy," she said, but her voice sounded different, older somehow. "They've been waiting for someone like me. They're not bad, they're just afraid." The ground cracked open wider, and the creatures started sinking back into the earth, taking Patricia with them. Eleanor was gone too, somewhere in the darkness below. The military was yelling at us to evacuate, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, watching my daughter disappear into the ancient world beneath the sand. Billy's scream finally snapped me out of it. I grabbed him and Rex, and we ran. Behind us, the desert was caving in, swallowing our trailer, the military vehicles, everything. The last thing I saw before we reached safe ground was a blue light pulsing deep beneath the sand, like a heartbeat. That was the night I lost half my family to something science can't explain. The military covered it up, of course. Said it was a natural sinkhole, a tragic accident. But Billy and I know the truth. And sometimes, on quiet nights, we can still feel those vibrations, like something calling from deep underground. That was 15 years ago. Billy's grown now, with kids of his own. We never went back to White Sands, but the desert never really left us. Rex stayed by our side until he passed away last year, always watching the ground like he was guarding us from something. The military kept their story straight, called it a natural disaster. They built a new facility over that spot, surrounded by high fences and warning signs. But they can't hide everything. Strange things still happen in that area. Compass needles spin for no reason, and electronic devices stop working. Billy became a scientist, studying underground formations. I know he's really searching for answers about that night, about his sister and mother. His own children, especially his daughter Sarah, remind me so much of Patricia. Last week, I caught Sarah drawing pictures of creatures with multiple eyes, creatures she couldn't possibly know about. When I asked her about them, she just smiled and said, "Aunt Patricia showed me in my dreams." Sometimes, late at night, my phone rings. When I answer, there's no voice, just that familiar humming sound we heard in the desert. And sometimes, I swear I can hear Patricia's laugh mixed in with it. Billy's recorded these calls, and the sound pattern matches the vibrations we felt that night. Last month, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a photograph, taken underground. It was blurry, but I recognized Eleanor's camera strap in the corner of the image. The picture showed a massive cave filled with blue light, and in the background, two figures, a woman and a young girl, their silhouettes familiar but different somehow. They were standing next to one of those creatures, looking not scared, but peaceful. Billy's daughter Sarah started talking in her sleep last night, in that same strange language Patricia used. This morning, she told me something that sent chills down my spine. She said, "Grandpa, Aunt Patricia wants you to know they're coming back soon, but this time they're not hiding. I don't know what's coming, but I can feel it. The vibrations are getting stronger again. Military vehicles have been moving through town more frequently. And last week, all the dogs in our neighborhood started digging holes at exactly the same time. Whatever's down there, whatever took my family, it's not finished with us." Patricia was right. They were just afraid. Afraid of us, afraid of being discovered. But now, they're ready to show themselves. And somehow, through my granddaughter, they're trying to prepare us. I'm sharing this story now because people need to be ready. Those creatures under the sand, they're ancient and powerful, but they're not our enemies. There's something else, something older than our civilization, and they've chosen certain people to help bridge our worlds. If you're ever in the desert and feel the ground shake, if you hear that strange humming sound, or if your children start talking about creatures with glowing eyes, remember my story. Remember that sometimes what we think is a monster is just another kind of family, waiting to be understood. And Patricia, if you're somehow reading this, Daddy misses you, both of you. And I understand now why you had to stay. Yesterday changed everything. I'm writing this with shaking hands because what we've all been feeling, what Sarah's been warning us about, it finally happened. It started during Sarah's 10th birthday party in our backyard. All the kids were playing when suddenly, every dog in the neighborhood began barking at once. Sarah stopped in the middle of opening her presents and looked straight up at the sky. "They're here," she whispered. The ground started shaking, not like an earthquake, but in that familiar rhythm I remembered from White Sands. Billy grabbed his kids, and I saw the same fear in his eyes that I'd felt 15 years ago. But Sarah just smiled. The military showed up within minutes, sirens blaring. But this time, they weren't trying to fight or hide anything. A young colonel stepped out and asked specifically for me and Billy by name. What he said next made my heart stop. "Mr. Harrison, your daughter Patricia sent us. She says it's time." They took us to the facility they'd built over our old campsite. The place was chaos, scientists running around, computers beeping, and that humming sound, louder than ever. On their screens, we could see them, dozens of those creatures, moving under the earth, all heading to the surface. But the biggest surprise was waiting for us in the main room. There, looking barely a day older than when I lost her, stood Patricia. She was different. Her eyes had a blue glow to them now, and her skin seemed to shimmer. Next to her was Eleanor, also unchanged, holding what looked like some kind of glowing map. "Dad," Patricia said, smiling, "we've been preparing for this day for 15 years. They needed time to trust, to understand. And now they want to meet everyone properly." Eleanor hugged us, and through tears, explained how the creatures, she called them the Guardians, had been Earth's first civilization. They went underground when the surface became too hostile, waiting for the right time to return. They needed special humans to help them communicate, to bridge our worlds. That's why they chose Patricia, and now Sarah. As I write this, the first of them is emerging peacefully in controlled locations around the world. The military is helping now, not fighting. Scientists are talking with them through interpreters like Patricia. They're sharing knowledge about our planet's history, about healing the environment, about technologies we never imagined. Sarah is sitting next to me, drawing pictures of what she says is their underground city. Billy's younger kids are showing signs of the same abilities Patricia had. This morning, I watched my grandchildren playing in the yard with what used to be our greatest fear. The world is changing fast. By the time you read this, you'll probably have seen them on the news. Remember my story when you do. Remember that sometimes the scariest things turn out to be the biggest blessings. Remember that my Patricia wasn't taken. She was chosen to help us all. Eleanor and Patricia still live mostly underground, helping the Guardians and humans understand each other. But they visit often now. Our family isn't broken anymore. It's just bigger than we ever imagined. And those thumping sounds at night? That's not something to fear anymore. That's just our new family saying hello. It's been 1 month since the Guardians emerged, and everything has changed. I'm writing from our new home, a special community where families like ours, those with what they call bridge children, live together. The government set it up to help us adjust to our new reality. Last week, Patricia took me down to their underground city for the first time. I was nervous, but the moment I stepped into those glowing blue tunnels, something felt right. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to move and change, telling stories older than time. Eleanor was there, working in what they call the translation chamber, where they figure out how to share the Guardian's knowledge with our world. The strangest part? Rex was there too, or at least something that looked just like him. Patricia explained that the Guardians can keep echoes of creatures they've bonded with. This Rex echo remembered me, wagging his tail just like he used to. Sarah spends more time underground now, learning from Patricia. The other day, She showed me how she can make small patterns in the sand move with just her thoughts. Billy's worried, but I see the same special spark in her that Patricia had. His younger twins, Tom and Alice, started having the dreams too. The Guardians aren't what we thought they were. Yes, they're huge and look scary, but they're gentle. They're like living libraries, carrying Earth's memories from times we can't even imagine. They went underground millions of years ago when the surface became too hot, and they've been watching, waiting, keeping records of everything. But not everyone's happy about this. Some people are scared, just like I was back then. There have been protests, and some folks think we should make the Guardians go back underground. But they don't understand. The Guardians aren't here to take over. They're here to help us fix the mistakes we've made with our planet. Yesterday, something amazing happened. One of the Guardians helped find a huge underwater freshwater source that could help millions of people. Another showed scientists how to clean up pollution using sound waves. They're teaching us things we never knew about our own world. Eleanor says there's so much more to come. The Guardians have seen civilizations rise and fall, and they want to help us avoid the same mistakes. Patricia is their voice, helping them explain things in ways we can understand. Sometimes at night, I sit in our backyard with Sarah, watching the sand move in small patterns as she practices what Patricia teaches her. The humming sound that once terrified me now feels like a lullaby. Billy's starting to accept it too, especially after the Guardians helped him understand his own scientific research better. The world is different now, but maybe that's okay. Maybe this is what was supposed to happen all along. Those 3 weeks in White Sands weren't the end of our family. They were just the beginning of something much bigger. And every now and then, when the sun sets just right, I see those giant shapes moving under the sand, and I don't feel afraid anymore. I feel grateful that my family, in its own strange way, helped bridge 2 worlds that were always meant to meet. My name is Rebecca Turner, and this happened to me in the summer of 1982. I never thought I'd share this story, but I need to tell someone what really happened in the Gila National Forest. Back then, I was a 28-year-old wildlife photographer, spending my days taking pictures of animals that most people never get to see. I loved my job, just me, my camera, and the wild creatures I photographed. After my parents died in a car crash 2 years before, I threw myself into work, finding peace in the quiet corners of nature where most people never venture. I had made quite a name for myself by then. My photos of rare mountain lions and endangered wolves had been in magazines like National Geographic, and I'd even won some awards. But something was missing. I wanted to find and photograph animals that no one had ever captured on film before. That's when I heard whispers about strange creatures in the Gila National Forest in New Mexico. Local people talked about weird things happening there, animals acting oddly, strange sounds at night, and people going missing. Most photographers stayed away, but that only made me more curious. I had my trusted companion, a 1981 Toyota Sunraider that I'd turned into my perfect home on wheels. I'd added special cabinets for my cameras, a small dark room for developing photos, and even a cozy bed tucked in the back. That RV had been my home for the past year, and I felt safer in it than anywhere else. Looking back now, I wish I'd listened to the warnings. I wish I'd paid attention to the fear in people's eyes when they talked about the deep parts of the forest. But I was too excited about the possibility of photographing something no one had ever seen before. I had no idea that my curiosity would lead me to discover things that would change me forever. I remember my first day in Gila National Forest like it was yesterday. The sun was setting when I parked my RV in a quiet spot near the forest's edge. The tall pine trees cast long shadows, and the air smelled fresh and clean. I felt excited, but also a bit nervous. You know that feeling when you're all alone in a new place? That night, I set up my cameras around the RV, hoping to catch some nighttime wildlife. I always did this on my first night somewhere new. Usually, I'd get pictures of deer, maybe some foxes, or if I was lucky, a mountain lion. I made myself some hot chocolate, sat at my little table, and started writing in my journal about the day. Around midnight, I heard it for the first time, a soft, gentle flute sound floating through the trees. At first, I thought it must be another camper, but something about it felt different. The music didn't sound like any flute I'd ever heard before. It was beautiful, but somehow made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I grabbed my flashlight and peeked out the window. The moonlight was bright enough to see the nearby trees, but I couldn't spot anyone playing music. Then I noticed something strange. All the forest sounds had stopped. No crickets chirping, no owls hooting, nothing. Just that mysterious flute music. The next morning, I checked my cameras. Most of the photos were normal, a few deer, a rabbit, nothing unusual. But the last photo made my hands shake. Between two trees, there was a tall, dark shape. It wasn't blurry like most nighttime photos. The shape was clear, but wrong. It looked like a person, but too tall, too thin, and its arms seemed too long. I told myself it must be shadows playing tricks, but deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of something I couldn't explain. When I walked around my RV that morning, I found something that made my stomach drop. There, neatly placed on my doorstep, was a small clay pot. It looked old, really old, with faded patterns carved into it. I hadn't seen anyone come by, and I'm a light sleeper. How did it get there? Who left it? And why? I picked up my satellite phone to call the local ranger station. I needed to tell someone about what I'd found. That's when I met Ranger Mike Thompson, and things started getting even stranger. Ranger Mike arrived in his green truck about an hour after my call. He was tall and friendly, probably in his 50s, with gray hair under his ranger hat. But when I showed him the clay pot and the strange photo, his smile disappeared. "Miss Turner," he said, sitting at my RV's small table, "how much do you know about this part of the forest?" I told him about my research, about the animals I wanted to photograph. He listened quietly, tapping his fingers on the table. "There are things about these woods that don't make it into the guidebooks," he said softly. "Last year, 3 hikers went missing right around here. We found their camp, everything in place, food still warm on the campfire, but they were just gone." My stomach did a little flip. "What do you think happened to them?" Mike picked up the clay pot carefully. "The local tribes have stories about this forest. They say it's alive, in a way we don't understand. They talk about the tall ones who guard it." He paused, looking out my window. I didn't believe any of it until last month. "What happened last month?" I asked. Not sure I wanted to know the answer. "I was doing my night patrol. Saw something standing between the trees. Thought it was a bear at first, but..." He shook his head. "Bears don't stand 7 feet tall. Bears don't have arms that reach their ankles. And bears definitely don't disappear into thin air." Just then, we heard a crash outside. We both jumped. Mike reached for his gun, and we rushed to the door. My camera equipment, which I'd carefully set up on a table outside, was scattered on the ground. But that wasn't what made us freeze. All around my RV, in a perfect circle, were deer tracks. Not normal deer tracks. These were deeper, like the deer had been walking on 2 legs. And in the middle of my scattered cameras was another clay pot, identical to the first one. Mike's face went pale. "Pack your things," he said quietly. "You need to leave. Now." But I didn't leave. I couldn't. Something about this place had grabbed hold of me, and I needed to know more. I didn't realize then that my curiosity would nearly cost me everything. That night, after Mike left, I sat in my RV looking at the 2 clay pots. The forest seemed different now, like it was watching me. As darkness fell, I heard the flute music again, closer this time. And for the first time, I thought I heard it calling my name. I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound made me jump. The wind in the trees, branches creaking, and that haunting flute music that kept playing on and off. I tried calling Ranger Mike around midnight, but my phone wouldn't work anymore. The screen just showed static. Around 2 a.m., something changed. I was sitting in my bed, looking through my camera photos when I noticed the air getting colder. My breath came out in little white clouds, even though it was summer. Then I saw something that made my heart stop. Handprints appearing on my foggy windows, but from the outside. They were huge, with fingers twice as long as a normal person's. I grabbed my flashlight and forced myself to look outside. That's when I saw them, 3 deer standing in the moonlight. But something was terribly wrong. They were standing on their back legs, like people. Their front legs hung down like arms, and their heads were turned completely backward, staring right at me with glowing eyes. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The deer just stood there, watching. Then, slowly, they raised their front legs and pointed toward the trees. Through the darkness, I could see a path I hadn't noticed before. My hands were shaking as I wrote in my journal. The forest wants to show me something. Am I going crazy? The deer aren't acting like deer anymore. Everything feels wrong. Just before sunrise, I heard a truck racing down the forest road. It was Mike's Ranger truck, but he wasn't driving it. The truck was empty, moving on its own, weaving between trees before disappearing into the forest. Later that morning, they found it parked perfectly at the ranger station, but Mike was gone. The police came and asked questions. They searched the area but found nothing, just Mike's hat hanging from a tree branch near my RV. When they left, I noticed something carved into the tree where they found his hat. It looked like a map, with symbols I'd never seen before. That's when I started feeling different. I could hear things I shouldn't be able to hear, conversations from miles away, animals whispering in the trees. When I looked in the mirror, my eyes seemed deeper, darker somehow. And sometimes, when I blinked, I could see through the eyes of the birds flying overhead. The forest was changing me, and I was letting it happen. I should have been terrified, but instead, I felt a strange calm. Like I was finally understanding something ancient and powerful. But I had no idea how dangerous that understanding would become. The next morning, I decided to follow the path the deer had pointed to. I know it sounds crazy, but something inside me just knew I had to go. I packed my backpack with water, some snacks, and my camera. I also took both clay pots. They felt important somehow. The path was narrow and looked like it hadn't been used in years. As I walked deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to grow taller and closer together. The sunlight barely made it through the branches, making everything look green and shadowy. After about an hour of walking, I found the cave. It wasn't very big, but there was something odd about it. The entrance was perfectly round, like someone had carved it, and there were strange symbols carved all around it. They looked similar to the ones on the clay pots. My flashlight showed me something amazing inside. The walls were covered in paintings. Not just any paintings, but ones that seemed to tell a story. They showed tall, thin figures walking among the trees. There were pictures of people changing, becoming something else. And there were paintings of the forest itself, but it looked more like a living thing than just trees. While I was taking pictures of the paintings, I felt something warm in my pocket. The clay pots were heating up, getting so hot I had to take them out. When I set them on the cave floor, they started humming, making the same sound as the flute music I'd been hearing. Then I heard a voice behind me. "You're starting to understand, aren't you?" I spun around, nearly dropping my camera. There, at the cave entrance, was a deer standing on 2 legs, but this time, I wasn't scared. The deer's eyes looked familiar. They were Ranger Mike's eyes. "Mike?" I whispered. The deer nodded slowly. "The forest chose me, Rebecca, just like it's choosing you now. But you need to know what that means. You need to see what's really happening here." As he spoke, I noticed my hands were changing. My fingers were getting longer, and my skin was starting to look like tree bark. When I touched the cave wall, I could feel the forest's heartbeat through the rock. "There's more," Mike said. "Much more. But tonight they're coming. The Wendigo pack. And you need to be ready." I wanted to ask what he meant, but he was already gone, leaving me alone in the cave with the humming pots and the ancient paintings that seemed to be moving in the shadows of my flashlight. That's when I heard it, a howl that didn't sound like any animal I knew, and it was getting closer. I ran back to my RV as fast as I could. The sun was setting, and the forest felt different now, alive and watching. The howls were getting closer, and they didn't sound like wolves anymore. They sounded almost human, but wrong. Inside my RV, I locked all the doors and windows. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my camera. The bark-like patches on my skin had spread up my arms, and when I looked in the mirror, my eyes had tiny gold flecks in them, like sunlight through leaves. Night fell quickly. That's when I saw them through my window, the Wendigo pack. They moved between the trees like shadows, but when they stepped into the moonlight, I could see them clearly. They were tall, maybe 8 feet, with bodies like stretched-out people. Their skin was gray and tight against their bones, and their fingers were long and sharp like branches. But their faces were the worst part. They looked like deer skulls with too many teeth. I heard their voices in my head. They weren't talking with words, but somehow I could understand them. They were hungry, not for food, but for something else. They wanted to change me, like they'd changed others before. "Come join us," they whispered in my mind. "Become part of the forest." The clay pot started humming again, louder this time. Through my window, I saw more deer gathering around my RV, all standing on 2 legs. Birds perched in the trees, all turning their heads to watch. Even the trees seemed to lean in closer. Then I saw him again, Mike, still in his half-deer form. He walked through the Wendigo pack like they were nothing more than trees in his way. "It's time to choose, Rebecca," he said, his voice clear in my head. "The forest has picked you. You can fight it and lose yourself, or accept it and become something more." I looked down at my hands, now more bark than skin. The forest's heartbeat was loud in my ears, and I could feel every animal, every tree, every living thing around me. I had to make a decision, but I was scared. Not of the Wendigos or the changes happening to me, but of losing who I was. That's when the real horror began. The night the forest showed me exactly what it wanted me to become. The Wendigos started circling my RV, their long fingers scraping against the metal. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard, but worse. Inside my head, their voices grew louder, showing me visions of what I could become. I saw myself running through the forest faster than any human, climbing trees like they were stairs, and understanding secrets that the woods had kept for thousands of years. My whole body felt hot, like I had a fever. The bark on my skin was spreading faster now, covering my shoulders and creeping up my neck. When I breathed, I could taste the forest, earth, leaves, and something ancient that I can't describe. Suddenly, my RV's door flew open by itself. The clay pots floated into the air, glowing with a soft green light. The Wendigos stopped moving. Everything got quiet, even the wind stopped. That's when I heard it, the forest's voice, not in words, but in feelings and pictures. It showed me everything, how it had been alive and aware for thousands of years, how it chose special people to become its guardians. The Wendigos weren't monsters, they were protectors, keeping people away from the forest's deepest secrets. Mike hadn't disappeared. He'd been chosen, just like I was being chosen now. "But why me?" I whispered. A warm feeling washed over me, like a hug from someone you trust completely. The forest showed me my photos, my love for wildlife, my lonely nights under the stars. It had been watching me, testing me, seeing if I could understand its magic without running away in fear. The Wendigos moved closer, but I wasn't scared anymore. I could see their true faces now. They were beautiful in a strange way, like ancient trees that had learned to walk. Mike stepped forward, holding out his hand. Behind him, the forest seemed to part, showing a path deeper into the woods than any human had ever gone. I had 2 choices. I could fight what was happening and try to stay human, or I could accept the forest's offer and become something else, something between human and nature, like Mike and the Wendigos. As I stood there, halfway between my old life and whatever waited for me in those woods, I made my decision. But I never imagined what would happen next, or how it would change me forever. I took Mike's hand and stepped out of my RV. The moment my feet touched the ground, everything changed. I could feel the earth breathing beneath me, and the trees whispered secrets I suddenly understood. The bark on my skin spread faster, but it didn't hurt. It felt right, like putting on a coat you've had forever. The Wendigos formed a circle around me. Up close, I could see that what I thought was gray skin was actually tiny leaves and moss growing on their bodies. They raised their long arms, and the forest floor began to glow with soft green light. "It will be quick," Mike said gently. "But you need to be sure. Once it starts, there's no going back." I nodded, unable to speak. The transformation had already begun. My fingers were growing longer, stretching like young branches reaching for the sun. My eyes burned, and when I blinked, I could see in ways I never could before. I could see heat, life, and the glowing threads that connected everything in the forest. Then, the pain hit. It felt like my whole body was being pulled apart and put back together. I fell to my knees, watching as my skin turned to bark and leaves sprouted from my arms. I wanted to scream, but what came out was more like the wind through trees. The Wendigos started their haunting song, the same flute music I'd been hearing all along. The sound wrapped around me like a blanket, helping me through the change. I could feel the forest's power flowing into me, teaching me things no human was meant to know. But something went wrong. The transformation stopped halfway. I wasn't fully human anymore, but I wasn't like the others either. I was stuck in between, and I could feel the forest's confusion. "This has never happened before," Mike said, his deer eyes wide with surprise. "The forest. It says you're fighting it without meaning to. Something in you won't let go." The Wendigos moved closer, their song turning darker. They thought I was rejecting the forest's gift. I could feel their anger building, like storm clouds gathering. I had to make a choice, right now, or things would turn dangerous fast. That's when I remembered something in my pocket, something that would change everything. My hand shook as I pulled out the small silver locket from my pocket, the last thing my parents gave me before they died. Inside was their picture, and suddenly I understood. This tiny piece of my past, this connection to who I was keeping me from fully changing. The Wendigos growled, moving closer. Their long fingers reached for me, and their deer skull faces looked angry now. The forest itself seemed to darken around us. "Rebecca," Mike said urgently, "you have to choose. Now, the forest won't wait, and the Wendigos won't understand." I looked at the locket one last time, tears running down my bark-covered cheeks. Then I did something that broke my heart. I dug a small hole in the earth and buried it. As soon as I covered it with dirt, everything changed. The transformation hit me like a wave. My body stretched taller, my fingers grew into branch-like claws, and leaves sprouted all over my skin. But this time, it didn't hurt. It felt like waking up from a long dream. I could see everything now. Every animal in the forest, every tree, every tiny insect. I could feel the earth breathing beneath me and hear conversations between trees that had been going on for hundreds of years. The Wendigos stopped growling. They bowed their heads, accepting me as one of them. Mike smiled, but his smile was sad. "You're different from us," he said. "The forest says you're special. You're not just a guardian, you're something new." He was right. I wasn't exactly like the Wendigos or like Mike. I could still think and feel like a human, but I had all the power of the forest too. I could switch between my human form and my forest form whenever I wanted. That's when I realized why the forest had chosen me. It didn't want to erase who I was. It wanted to create a bridge between its world and the human world. Someone who could protect both. But this gift came with a price. I could never go back to my old life. The forest was my home now, and I had new responsibilities. Strange things were coming to the woods, things that even the Wendigos feared, and I needed to be ready. As the sun rose on my first morning as something more than human, I wrote my last entry in my journal. People needed to know the truth about Gila National Forest. They needed to know what really lives in these woods. And that's why I'm telling you this story now. That was 5 years ago. I still live in these woods, watching, protecting, and keeping the balance. My RV sits empty now, covered in vines and leaves, a reminder of my old life. Sometimes hikers find it and wonder about the woman who disappeared in Gila National Forest. The changes in me kept happening slowly. My hair grew long and green like moss, and small flowers bloom in it during spring. When I walk through the forest in my true form, animals don't run away anymore. They come to me, telling me their secrets. Even the youngest trees know my name now. I've learned to control the forest's power. I can make plants grow with just a touch, talk to animals, and even change the weather when I need to. But I'm careful with these gifts. The forest taught me that every power comes with responsibility. Mike is still here too. We patrol the forest together, keeping people safe from things they wouldn't understand. Sometimes, when the moon is full, we run with the Wendigo pack, moving through the trees faster than wind. But lately, something's been wrong. New dangers are coming to our forest. Last week, I found strange metal devices hidden in the ground, people trying to find the forest's secrets. And there are darker things stirring in the deep woods, ancient things that should stay sleeping. I still keep my camera. Sometimes, when I'm in my human form, I take pictures of the forest's magic. Not to share with the world, but to remember who I used to be. The photos show strange things now. Shadows that move by themselves, lights that shouldn't exist, and creatures that most people think are just stories. Yesterday, I found another lost hiker near my old RV. She was a young photographer, just like I used to be, looking for strange creatures to photograph. I led her safely out of the forest, but before she left, I whispered a warning in her mind. Some mysteries should stay mysterious. Tonight, as I write this last part of my story, I can hear the Wendigos calling. There's work to be done. The forest needs its guardians, and I have to go. But remember, next time you're in the woods and feel like something's watching you, you're right. We're always watching. We're protecting you, even if you don't know it. And if you ever hear flute music in the forest at night, or see a woman with green hair and bark-like skin, don't be afraid. Just nod and walk away. Some secrets are better left in the woods.